Discover the incredible moment she pleaded, transforming a rancher's life in 3 touching minutes. Jack stood beneath the unrelenting Nebraska sun, sweat drenching his shirt as he wrestled with the barbed wire fence. Each taut strand felt like a noose tightening around his psyche, strangling the very legacy his family had built over generations. It was a cruel irony, he thought, to toil so hard against the elements only to feel crushed by the weight of expectation. The rugged land had been in his family for as long as he could remember, yet every day that passed felt more like defeat than success. Losing that second round of funding to salvage his ranch was like having the wind knocked out of him, and a cloud of despair haphazardly lingered around him, dark and heavy that he couldn't escape the gnawing doubts creeping into his mind. Was keeping the family tradition alive worth the struggle, the sleepless nights filled with worrying bills, and the bitterness of isolation from a world that had moved on without him? What good was an enduring legacy in the face of an uncertain future? Each time he heard the distant roar of a passing car, an echo of the outside world, it was as if it was calling him, mocking his stagnation. Suddenly, he looked up to see a figure approaching, a young woman, bright eyes full of fervor, contrasting sharply with the browns and greens of his ranch. "Please," she exclaimed, breathless from her trek across the field. "I'm Sarah. I study environmental science, and I have an idea that could change everything." Her enthusiasm pierced through his mental fog. For a moment, Jack found himself intrigued. Her words spilled out faster than he could follow, enticing him with promises of sustainable practices that could rejuvenate his land while rationalizing a future. But skepticism gripped him like a vice. "This is how my family always did things," he replied, his voice gruff. The legacy weighed so heavily on his shoulders that he wore it like a cloak, one he couldn't easily shrug off. Yet, as he looked into her eyes, trapped somewhere between optimism and determination, he found himself reflecting on his own dreams, the aspirations that once danced in his youthful heart. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue, but as they discussed, the shadows of his doubts grew darker. Sarah confided her struggles with her own family, who viewed Jack's way of life as antiquated, a relic of a bygone era that refused to evolve. Her voice trembled slightly as she shared her frustrations, weaving their stories together in a fragile tapestry. They were both fighting battles, tethered by the very traditions that could either bind them or set them free. The emotional stakes became clearer when he thought of the neighbor, a rancher whose envy threatened to undermine them at every turn. Sabotage loomed like a storm on the horizon. Jack's heart raced at the thought of standing alone against the criticism that awaited him, labeling him a traitor to his own kin. The laughter and judgment of peers echoed in his mind, taunting him as he pictured their faces now. Would they still see him as a rugged cowboy or brand him forever as a foolish dreamer? Jack glanced around, the weight of decisions crashing down as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows on the ground. Anxiety surged, forcing him to confront the very essence of who he was and the legacy he inherited. The weight seemed unbearable as he clung to the only remnants of security he knew. As Sarah's face illuminated with hope beside him, could he grasp the idea of a future built on change? The answer collided. With his heart, will the town accept this fight for integrity over tradition, or would he risk everything he's ever fought for, teetering on the edge of a precipice into the unknown? Jack stood transfixed, his heart hammering against his chest as he wrestled with Sarah's idea. Her vision of sustainable practices was intoxicating, a breath of fresh air chiseling away at his ingrained belief that everything had to remain as it was. Yet the roots of his upbringing ran deep, entangled with conviction and pride. To let go of the past felt like a betrayal, an abandonment of family values that he shifted his weight, wiping sweat from his brow before gathering the courage to speak. "You really believe this could work?" The doubt in his voice masked a flicker of hope, a tiny flame stirred by Sarah's optimism. "Absolutely," she replied, her enthusiasm unyielding. "Think about it. We can change the way you farm, make it compatible with the ecosystem. More than that, we can draw people here instead of pushing them away. But as her words echoed in his mind, he grappled with his instincts, the inertia of tradition pulling him backward. People around here, they won't understand, he muttered, a heaviness unfurling over his shoulders like an old blanket. His stomach churned at the impending confrontation with the neighbor's men who held the same values and scoffed at change. Sarah paused, her eyes reflecting a fierce determination. They might surprise you. If you lead, they'll follow. Don't you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself? A renewal of the land instead of a slow decline? Her words seeped into the cracks of his resolve, challenging his perceptions. Could he envision reclaiming not just the land, but his ambition, his sense of self? Jack felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of expectation not only from his family's legacy but also from the community that had defined him for so long. The fear of losing his identity waged war against the tantalizing thought of renewal. "Let us do a trial run," Sarah suggested, her excitement palpable. "Just a small section of the ranch, see how it works. If it flops, you can say I told you so and go back to how things were." There was daring in her proposition, and part of Jack wanted to embrace it to peel off the layers of doubt and plunge into something new. But another part, a more paralyzing part, rooted him where he stood. The ranching community's skepticism was daunting, and the prospect of public failure loomed like a thundercloud. Still, could he afford not to try? As he hesitated, a deep-seated realization unfurled within him. The dread he felt about his fate was not merely about the land. It mirrored the anxiety of being stagnant in life, of allowing fear to dictate his choices. What if by holding on to the past, he was suffocating the future? "Okay," he finally said, his voice steadying with conviction. "Let us give it a shot. For one season, I'll try your way." He saw the gratitude blossom across Sarah's face, and in that moment, he felt something shift within himself, a stirring of courage. Yet as the sun dipped lower, casting a foreboding shadow over the land, another thought crept in: what if the change he initiated incited backlash? The neighbors' envy could turn to outright hostility. The time had come to face the storm gathering on the horizon, a clash between loyalty to tradition and the instinct to forge a new path. As Jack turned back to the fence, he felt a faint pulse of hope, pushing against the tide of hesitation. The seed of transformation had been sown, but would it flourish or falter? The morning sun broke through the heavy clouds, casting a golden hue over the ranch as Jack stood surveying the vast expanse of land that had been in his family for generations. The stillness of the morning was deceptive. Beneath it lay an undercurrent of anxiety as he contemplated the monumental shift he was about to undertake. Today marked the day he would prepare the soil for Sarah's trial run, a small act that could ripple outward into something far greater. He clenched the edge of his weathered hat, feeling the weight of the decision settle heavily on his shoulders. While the hope of rejuvenating the land thrilled him, it was overshadowed by a storm of unease about how others would perceive his choice. The neighbors were not just acquaintances, they were friends, comrades in this life of sweat and toil, bound by shared traditions and collective history. Jack swallowed hard, contemplating the possible backlash of abandoning the familiar ways they had upheld together. As he began to gather his tools, Jack's mind raced with doubt. What if his experiments failed? What if he took everything he'd built and tore it down for the sake of a youthful dream? Yet as he moved, rhythmically placing the shovels and hoes in their designated spots, he sensed an unfamiliar fire ignite within him, a determination to break the chains of routine holding him back. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing calloused arms, a testament to years of labor. Each push of the shovel into the earth felt symbolic, a physical manifestation of his internal struggle. Digging into the ground, Jack pictured not just the soil, but the layers of his past, the narratives that had dictated his actions for so long. He could almost hear the echoes of his father, instilling the importance of that same traditions which now felt like fetters. "Maybe I can adjust this," he muttered to himself, lifting dirt and exposing the coolness underneath. "We can try something different without dismissing what's come before." With each scoop, he envisioned the possibilities, vibrant plants sprouting where old systems faltered, life flourishing in harmony with nature instead of against it. The idea that he could cultivate something new while still honoring his heritage began to resound deeply within him. Perhaps Sarah's methods weren't just a challenge to the familiar, but a complementary extension of his legacy. Just then, a faint rustle interrupted his contemplation. Jack turned, startled to see a group of neighbors approaching, their faces a mix of skepticism and curiosity. His heart raced. This was the moment he had feared. They knew him, they trusted him, but now would they understand his decision? Jack! One of them called out, his voice thick with doubt. What's this we're hearing about changes on the ranch? Are you really going to mess with what's worked for years? The edge of each word felt like a jab, and it stung deep within. Somehow, their disbelief pressed heavier than all his insecurities combined. Taking a steadying breath, Jack realized there was no turning back. Perhaps it was time to step into his truth. Actually, yes, he replied, surprising himself with the strength of his voice. I'm hoping to try something new, something that could benefit all of us in the long run. It's just a small section for now, like a test run. Murmurs spread among the group. Jack could see the uncertainty in their eyes weave its way through their skepticism like a vine. But then, he caught a flicker of something more, a faint spark of intrigue, a glimmer of openness that made him feel bold. Why don't you come by and see for yourselves? Give me a chance to show you what I'm trying to do. If it flops, I'll be the first to admit it. For a moment, silence reigned. Then one neighbor stepped forward, the tension in his brow slightly easing. Fine. We'll give you a look. But don't screw this up, Jack. As they turned to leave, Jack felt a thawing in the air, an opportunity for dialogue, for discourse instead of confrontation. What if he could illustrate the potential he saw in Sarah's vision, as Jack returned to his labor? Joy and dread clashed within him like a wild storm. The echoes of his world shifted, leaving him with an electrifying question: would he be able to convince them of the necessity for change, or would their fears extinguish the very spark he had kindled? Jack stood at the edge of the freshly turned soil, the rich, dark earth clinging to the soles of his boots as he pondered the trajectory of his life. The sun climbed higher, its warmth soaking through his skin, igniting a subtle resilience within him. He had taken the first physical step toward transformation, yet he still wrestled with an inner turmoil that raged like a tempest. The thought of his neighbors weighing his progress in judgment pressed onto him, threatening to consume the excitement that he had begun to cultivate with Sarah's methods. He inhaled deeply, attempting to fill his chest with courage. It became clear that today was about more than just preparation. Today was about fortifying his spirit. Turning back, he grabbed the hoe and started to break up more dirt, sweat trickling down the sides of his face. As he worked, Jack's mind drifted to the wavering support he anticipated from those around him. What would he tell them if the trial didn't go according to plan? The vulnerability of facing their skepticism gnawed at him, whispering hollow fears into his ear. However, a new clarity burst through the haze of doubt. This venture wasn't just for him. It was a chance to be a beacon of change, a bridge linking the past with the potential of the future. With each swing of the hoe, memories surfaced of his father, planting seeds of diligence and perseverance deep within him. But this was different. His father had embraced tradition, and Jack was asserting himself into the unknown. Maybe it's time to break free, he whispered, hardly aware of the declaration he had made. The what-ifs that had haunted him began to transform into what could be. Was he really willing to stand in the face of uncomfortable conversations? To endure their skepticism for the sake of progress? As if the universe answered his internal questions, the wind picked up, rustling through the nearby trees and sending a flurry of leaves dancing around him. It was as if the land, too, felt his awakening. Jack raised his head, reveling in the moment, feeling a surge of conviction. The fear subsided, and a quiet determination replaced it, urging him to embrace the journey regardless of the outcome. Glancing back at the neighbors' retreating figures, he felt an unexpected spark of hope. They would return, and when they did, he promised himself to exemplify commitment and honesty in addressing their concerns. He no longer desired to be a replica of the past. he needed to be authentic in his quest for innovation and growth. Perhaps this could also serve as a clever opportunity to draw others into the conversation, encourage them to witness, experience, and learn. Maybe instead of viewing his choices as a departure from their shared past, they could come to see them as an opportunity and experience fueling their own growth too. Determined, he crafted a plan in his mind. He would invite them into the trial run, let them participate, test their own hands alongside him. The prospect began to unfurl within him like a flower seeking the sun, each petal revealing a facet of his potential that had long desired the light. Jack wiped his brow and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his choices transform into strength. How invigorating it felt to reclaim his agency. There was still a long road ahead, and the possibility of defeat lingered, but it was time to think about potential, collaboration, and interconnected growth. This idea surged forward, overshadowing the ghosts of tradition as they weakened. Yet another thought lingered in the back of his mind: what if they still rejected the change? What if his commitment wasn't enough to bridge the chasm of doubt? In this clash between conviction and anxiety, Jack knew now that he had to confront the truth embedded in his heart. What would it take to turn skeptics into allies, and would the risk be worth the reward? The sun descended into the horizon, casting a golden shawl over Jack's meticulously turned earth. As he wiped the last bead of sweat from his brow, a renewed urgency rumbled within him. He could no longer dwell on the doubts that had clung to him like stubborn weeds. The hour had come to approach his neighbors, to lift the veil of fear and skepticism with the clarity of his intentions. He gathered his tools and took a step back, admiring the sight of what lay before him, not just the new tilled soil, but a canvas for change. The practicality of his plan was sound. Yet beneath the excitement lurked uncertainty, a gnawing possibility that his neighbors might not see things as he did. What if their resistance remained unyielding, blind to the opportunities he envisioned? The idea pricked and prodded at his resolve. He needed to do more than just invite them. He needed to communicate the gravity of his project, the lessons it could yield for everyone. In the days that followed, Jack immersed himself in research, fueled by an insatiable thirst for knowledge. He read about sustainable practices, watched videos on innovative farming techniques, and sought the stories of others who had paved transformative paths. Each nugget of information anchored his commitment deeper, revealing layers of potential he had not previously recognized. Jack was learning not just about farming but about leadership, growth, and connection. Each morning found him at the fields with a fire inside, translating concepts into practice, hands entering the earth with love and intention. Yet the more he prepared, the more he realized that he needed a deeper understanding of how to engage with his neighbors. Was it enough to simply invite them to witness his work? He grappled with the looming specter of rejection and unearthed a realization: he must be willing to share raw truths about his journey, the struggles and breakthroughs, to invite authenticity into the dialogue. The day before the scheduled gathering loomed large. As he arranged seating, refreshments, and tools, Jack fought against a wave of fear. The prospect of facing the very judgment he had hoped to challenge felt overwhelmingly heavy. What if, amid the enthusiasm and hopes, his vulnerabilities seeped through the cracks? What if the fear of inadequacy became evident? Focus, he muttered to himself, taking a moment to collect his thoughts. The journey wasn't merely about results, it was about transparency and community. He decided to open the floor, no pretense, no polished narrative, just honesty about his quest and the lessons hidden within it. To discuss not only his aspirations but also to share his struggles would weave an authentic fabric of connection. With newfound courage, he picked up the papers outlining his plan, painstakingly drafted with hopes of clarity but haunted by the fear of incompleteness. They felt like remnants of a self still shackled to insecurity rather than soaring with ambition. He longed to turn those pages into living conversations, to invite the human experience into his labor. Finally, the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving a tapestry of twilight. Jack glanced at the fields, now an embodiment of both his labor and potential. He stepped back, his heart thundering against confinement, fully aware that everything depended on tomorrow's response. Tomorrow was not merely an encounter, it was a monumental step toward redefining not just his path but those of his neighbors too. Could they transform from passive observers to engaged collaborators? Jack inhaled deeply, steadying himself for the moment ahead. As the shadows lengthened, he whispered a silent prayer. What if this gathering marked the first step in a chain of transformation that connected the past with the present, sparking a fire of innovation among his neighbors? The dawn revealed a muted canvas, a delicate blend of pastels shimmering over the horizon. Jack stood at the edge of the field, feeling the earth cool beneath his boots. Each blade of grass seemed to bring alive the whispers of the day ahead, a reminder that this was no ordinary morning. This was the moment he had envisioned buried amid the soil of his aspirations. With each anxious tick of the clock, the weight of anticipation pressed heavily against his chest. Jack had prepared not only the logistics of the gathering but also the depths of his heart, where uncertainty lingered. As neighbors began to filter in, he realized this was not simply about presenting his idea, it was about offering pieces of himself. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, positioning himself at the center. A cloud of doubt loomed in his mind, threatening to undo every well-laid plan. He spotted Harriet, the local skeptic who often dismissed the unorthodox. Her narrowed eyes cut through his confidence like a well-honed blade. Maybe she wouldn't grasp that success is not merely measured by results. Could she recognize the value in an idea taking root? He cleared his throat and began, "Thank you all for coming." The warmth in his voice momentarily stilled the unease that coursed through him. He detailed his vision of sustainable practices, infusing each word with personal nuance, plurality of thought like seeds scattered in the wind. With every detailed description, he aimed to cultivate understanding and connection. But beneath the surface, he felt resistance simmering, the air electrified with question marks stalking his every sentiment. When he shared his struggles with failure, the vulnerability exposed a slice of humanity. A few nods encouraged him, softening the atmosphere. "I've faced setbacks, the doubts gnawing at me, the days when nothing seemed to grow." The honest admission felt like a pivot point in the room. He saw eyes soften, perhaps understanding the reality that each person wrestled with their own garden of doubts, but Harriet's voice broke through the burgeoning connection. "What makes you think our way of doing things isn't good enough?" Her challenge rang heavy in the humid air. Jack caught breath as his heart raced, fangs of fear snapping at his resolve. He had anticipated resistance but not this direct confrontation. He had to face it head-on. "Harriet, I respect our traditions deeply," he replied, grounding himself in the truth of her challenge. "This is not about dismissing what has worked. It's about exploring what might coexist. We can learn from each other." He searched her face for a flicker of understanding, but it eluded him. The silence that followed felt tumultuous, yet Jack pressed on, unsure if any words could penetrate the chill in the air. His heart pushed him to engage further, and with a burst of impulse, he turned to the gathering. "What if we could create a hybrid of our practices? An evolution rather than a replacement?" He could feel the tension ripple through the group. Some shifted in their seats, eyebrows raised, while others exchanged glances. At that moment, Jack realized this was not merely a meeting, this was an opportunity for true dialogue. He opened the floor, inviting questions and contributions. As voices mingled, a rich tapestry of dialogue began to unfold, weaving in varying perspectives. Yet, beneath the shouts of disagreement and reluctant agreements, a new worry bloomed in Jack's chest. Would this genuine effort be enough to win them over? Just as he thought they might find common ground, Harriet's icy glare returned, raising the stakes. "You're asking us to change everything based on your uncertain methods. Why should we trust you?" The room fell silent again, a taut string ready to snap. Jack's pulse quickened. This wasn't merely a professional challenge, it was a moment that could redefine his credibility. What was he willing to risk to forge this connection? With the echoes of his heartbeats drowning out the noise, Jack felt the heated surge of conviction swell within him. "Because I believe change begins with choice, and every choice here could alter the future of our community. I am vulnerable in this journey, but I cannot be alone in it." The words hung in the air like the first raindrops in an impending storm. Would this acknowledgement of his uncertainty incite compassion or provoke further doubt? As Jack scanned the room, the response was obscured in a mist of silence, and he held his breath. This pivotal moment felt decisive, holding the promise of collaboration or the sting of rejection. What would be born from the budding tension? Acceptance, evolution, or a resounding refusal? Jack's eyes widened as the reality of his situation crystallized. The moment had indeed come to confront not only Harriet but the fears confining him. Jack's heartbeat thundered in his ears, and the whispers of doubt morphed into an oppressive silence. The faces around him shifted from stoic to curious, hints of skepticism melting into contemplative expressions. His words had hit a nerve. He sensed an opportunity, but uncertainty gnawed at him. Had he gone too far, or had he just laid a foundation for genuine dialogue? Harriet's piercing gaze remained fixed on him, a living reminder of his fears and the very essence of his conflict. He felt exposed, stripped of pretenses, vulnerable in a way that was both terrifying and liberating. The challenge she posed reverberated through his mind. Why should they trust him? Could he even trust himself? To reclaim the moment, he needed to root his vision deeper than abstract concepts. He had to connect. I know my methods are new, and they may seem risky, he continued, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. But every innovation carries the weight of uncertainty. Look closer. Farming today is drastically different from what our grandparents practiced. If we hadn't adapted, many wouldn't thrive. He saw a few nodding heads, the faintest lights of agreement flickering to life. Jack pressed further, courage igniting within him like a flame. I'm not here to upend your work, I want to combine the old and new to fortify our future. Imagine a world where we benefit from tradition while embracing innovation. There it was, the glimmer of possibility. As he painted a vivid picture of a thriving farm, harmonizing old ways with new technologies, Jack sensed the tension begin to soften, replaced by intrigue. He had moved from mere presentation to storytelling, a transformation engaging their hearts and minds. Yet, Harriet remained unmoved. That sounds idealistic, Jack. But what have you actually accomplished? Talk can be convincing, but it doesn't till the soil or bring in a harvest. Her voice cut sharp, a reminder of the roadblocks that still lay ahead. Before he could falter, Jack recalled the small victories of his journey: the plot of land he had revitalized, the organic produce he had successfully marketed. Memories of sleepless nights wrestling with doubt flowed in, but now they were bathed in clarity and purpose. I've begun the work on my own property. I've seen the results firsthand. It's not just talk. It's effort, trial, and hope. But I cannot thrive without collaborating, without drawing from the wealth of knowledge in this room. The sincerity in his declaration allowed silence to fill the void once again, but this time, it felt different. Eyes darted around, taking in his resolve, weighing their hesitations against his honesty. Could an alliance really be born from this moment? The air was thick with potential, electric with the anticipation of an unseen shift. Jack suddenly remembered his grandfather's old words: sometimes, the most powerful tool for growth is unyielding conviction. He refocused, weaving this understanding into a broader statement. We each believe in the land we stand on. It binds us, even if our visions differ. I'm asking for a chance to see if we can nurture that land together. The words settled over the group like a delicate blanket, and he watched as the once determined faces softened, considering his plea. Yet deep within, Jack realized the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges that echoed far beyond this room. Then, an unexpected voice emerged from the crowd: Janet, a longtime neighbor known for her wisdom and experience. Jack's right, she interjected. Let's not forget, every fruit you've ever harvested started with a seed. Maybe it's time to plant a few more. With those words, a slow wave of murmurs spread, suggesting a shift in perspective. Potential acceptance was blooming, yet Harriet's glare lingered, her stubbornness unyielding. Jack recognized the delicate dance he was now part of, an intricate balance between respect for tradition and the necessity for evolution. But could he truly pull this off? The question loomed large in his mind: was he capable of leading this change, or would the weight of doubt drown him in the chaos of resistance? He had opened a door, but the path behind it was still shrouded in uncertainty, echoing with the fears of what was still to come. As he stood before them, the room remained at the precipice. This was merely a first step, a dialogue that could grow or wither. But one truth pulsated within him: he was no longer just a voice seeking connection, he was a catalyst for change. Would his resolve withstand the challenges ahead, or would the realization of his fears anchor him to the ground? Jack took a deep breath, drawing strength from the tentative nods and whispers of support that had begun to ripple through the group. Still, the weight of Harriet's scrutiny felt like an anchor, threatening to pull him back into self-doubt. Every fiber of his being screamed for clarity of purpose, for a way to forge a path not just for himself, but for those who held his future in their hands. Change is never easy, he began again, his voice resonating with the gravity of conviction. But look around. We're all here because we care about this land, our families, our future. Together, we can harness the potential of both old and new practices. He could see the fissures in their skepticism, and with each passing moment, he learned to navigate the currents of their uncertainty. His mind raced as he formulated his next point, conscious of the fact that he was no longer completely adrift, he was steering the ship, however precariously. We've all faced our own challenges. I remember the first crop I attempted to grow. Everything was a fight. The land was unyielding, the weather unpredictable. I nearly gave up. It was only when I reached out for guidance that I began to see any progress. Isn't that what we need now? A collective effort. Harriet remained stoic, her arms crossed tightly, resolute in her disapproval. No matter how hard Jack tried, he felt her skepticism anchor her firmly to her beliefs. Yet, the other farmers were shifting, uncrossing their arms, exchanging glances that spoke of contemplation. At that moment, a spark of inspiration surfaced, illuminating a path ahead. What if he turned the doubts back toward them? I understand your hesitations. They stem from a place of profound knowledge and care. But think for a moment about what it took for you to succeed. Was it not also due to the evolution of your methods? Something flickered behind Harriet's hard exterior, perhaps a memory or an acknowledgement. Jack pressed on, sensing the tide might be shifting. If we remain stagnant, the land we love will eventually suffer. Are we willing to let fear hold us back from what could be? He could feel the tension in the room begin to melt away, a glimmer of curiosity igniting in some of their eyes. Jack took another step forward, laying bare his own fears once more, no longer feeling like he could afford to hide them. I'm terrified of the unknown, of trying something new and failing. But what terrifies me more is the thought of standing still while everything around us changes. His voice, once quaking with doubt, now carried a newfound conviction. He stood before them, not just as a farmer with dreams but as a fellow steward of the earth, daring to lean into his vulnerability. Then, almost out of instinct rather than calculation, he unfolded a blueprint of his farm initiative that he had prepared weeks earlier. If you give me a chance, I can show you how I've started rejuvenating my land, combining regenerative agriculture with traditional methods to increase crop yield and resiliency. This isn't about forcing change, it's about inviting it constructively. Jack watched as Harriet unfolded her arms, momentarily breaking her hardened demeanor. Change is hard, Jack, she finally responded, her voice softer yet still fraught with caution. But I'll consider what you've proposed. The silence that followed felt heavy with potential. Maybe he really had initiated something meaningful, nudging the door open just a fraction wider. Yet Jack understood the truth behind her words. Consideration did not guarantee acceptance, it merely hung in the air, suspended like dew on the early morning grass. As Jack scanned the room, uncertainty still loomed. Did Harriet's concession represent a change of heart or just a polite acknowledgement? Would the other farmers rally behind him, or fold back into their old rhythms? In this tightrope of trust, he realized he was still balancing precariously, and deeper still, a stark realization settled within him. He was confronted not just with the fears of others, but the depth of his self-doubt. Was this dialogue truly the start of a collaborative journey, or merely a disguise for his own desperation? With these thoughts brewing in his mind, Jack's focus turned inward, catching the dawning familiarity of a potential transformation. He had stepped into the person he had always aimed to become, a connector amid chaos, a bridge between beliefs. But Catherine's unyielding stare resurfaced from within, a warning that the real test loomed ahead. Would he be able to walk the line between tradition and innovation without sacrificing his core values? Or would his naivety lead to a failure that might drown both him and his dreams? Real change lingered like ripe fruit just beyond his reach. He could sense it, taste it, but was he ready to act upon it? The moment of execution approached, and with it, the undeniable confrontation of his adversary, Harriet. Was this the beginning of something profound? As the silence stretched on, Jack felt the need for a decisive action surging within him. The cautious glances from the other farmers became a chorus demanding resolution, and he faced their expectant expressions, a maelstrom of anticipation swirling inside him. His heart raced, fueled not only by adrenaline but by an unsettling mix of hope and dread. "Let us put it to action," he declared, his voice steadying as he spoke. "I propose we hold a workshop at my farm. I'll demonstrate the regenerative techniques I've begun implementing, and we can discuss how to blend them with your established methods. Let us break down these walls of skepticism by experimenting together." The intensity of the moment pressed against him. Doubts flared briefly. What if the experiment failed? What if they rejected him outright? But beneath those fears, igniting his decision, was a flicker of determination. This was more than a proposal. It was a chance to redefine not just his own path, but possibly theirs as well. Jack felt Harriet's gaze bore into him, wrestling internally between her skepticism and the slight hint of curiosity he now perceived. She finally spoke, her voice laced with incredulity. "Are you really prepared for this? You understand the risks involved?" He could sense the challenge beneath her words, yet he couldn't afford to falter now. "I am. If I can't commit to change, how can I ask others to take a leap of faith?" Their exchange ignited tension in the room. The others watched with rapt attention. Jack could almost hear the gears in their minds turning. Was he being reckless or elegantly audacious? In that split second, Jack envisioned the awkwardness of their gathered group transformed into a community forging a path forward. He could see them experimenting with the amalgamation of their old ways intertwined with the new, learning from the land and from one another. "Let me show you how," he pressed on, this time with an urgency born from belief. "Let us redefine what we can achieve together. I invite each of you next Saturday to join me on my farm." The challenge had been issued, and despite the uncertainty, Jack felt exhilarated. Yet deep down, he was grappling with lingering doubts. What if he failed spectacularly in front of them? Would Harriet turn that into a mark of defeat for him? The potential rejection still loomed large in his mind. Yet the burden of sitting idle felt heavier than the fear of risk. That he cast a brief look around the room, seeking the faces beyond Harriet. Some were still skeptical, but a few glimmers of interest flickered like candle flames, gradually overtaking the shadows of doubt. Jack's resolve solidified in that moment. He wasn't just fighting for innovation, he was reclaiming his right to lead. "Think about what it could mean for all of us. This isn't solely about my farm, it's about our future," he said, projecting his voice with newfound confidence. He realized his worth was not just in planting seeds in the ground but also in planting ideas in the minds of those around him. When the meeting ended, Jack walked out into the fresh air, heart pounding and mind racing. The adrenaline rush muddled his senses, he felt exhilarated and terrified all at once. The night sky watched as if sharing in his turmoil, a swirling void reflecting his mixed emotions. Now, he faced a new layer of confrontation, the necessity to prepare, to execute this budding idea. Questions spun within him. How would he present his methods effectively? What if he couldn't measure up to their expectations? Deep down, what if this endeavor exposed his inexperience? The days leading up to Saturday felt interminable, a stretch filled with sleepless nights steeped in rehearsals and the gathering of resources. Still, Jack clung to that thread of possibility, drawn forward by the vision he had kindled. Finally, the day arrived, and everything came to a head. As he stepped outside, preparing for the farmer's arrival, a sudden realization struck him: if he was going to walk this path, he had to confront not only their judgments but his own apprehensions as well. Could he take his burgeoning idea and make it tangible? The moment was upon him, a moment that could alter the course of his professional and personal life forever. Then came the unmistakable sound of approaching footsteps. A small group began to emerge on the horizon, uncertainty clouding their faces. Jack squared his shoulders, understanding that his heart would either triumph or falter based on this pivotal moment. The future teetered just within reach. What remained to be seen was whether he was ready to grasp it. And as he met their gaze, the weight of impending revelation hung heavily in the air. Would he rise to the occasion, facing both their skepticism and his own? The answer awaited just beyond the threshold of courage. On that fateful Saturday, as Jack stood at the threshold of his farm, he felt the weight of the future pressing against his shoulders. With every passing moment, anticipation swelled in his chest. When he finally glimpsed the familiar faces of his neighbors approach, apprehension mingled with determination coursed through him. They were here, despite their reservations, ready to see if his experiment would breathe life into their age-old ways, fostering a bridge between tradition and innovation. "Welcome, everyone," Jack called out, projecting confidence despite his racing heart. "Thank you for coming today. I know this is a departure from what we typically do. I appreciate you giving this a chance." The crowd was small but potent. His neighbors, friends, and fellow farmers, their faces a tapestry of skepticism and curiosity. He could feel their uncertain energy surrounding him like a thick fog. As he guided them to the plot he had prepared, Jack watched their eyes flicker from the familiar landscape of his ranch to the freshly tilled soil. It contrasted starkly with the fields they were accustomed to. Bright green seedlings took root in straight, orderly rows, the product of his hard work, experimentation, and Sarah's innovative ideas. His heart raced as he prepared to showcase the potential he had envisioned. "I want to show you how these sustainable practices work," Jack began, his voice trembling momentarily before settling into familiar conviction. "This isn't about erasing our traditions, it's about enhancing them. I believe we can foster a living landscape, one that respects our past while nurturing our future." He demonstrated the methods he had learned, amending the soil with natural compost, showing how crop rotation could enrich the land, and demonstrating the ways to plant cover crops. He invited them to join in, their hands digging into the earth alongside him. Each touch of the soil united them, creating an unmistakable bond. Every hesitant smile that surfaced amid the crowd signaled a shift, a potential for collaboration unfurling before him. As questions arose, Jack engaged with transparency. "I know this is a big leap, I had doubts too. But just like you, I want what's best for our community and land." A grudging respect took shape among them, even from those who had been the most critical. It went beyond the simple mechanics of farming, it delved into the heart of transformation. Then, like a sudden storm, Harriet's voice sliced through the hopeful murmurings. "You expect us to follow your methods based on mere words, Jack. What if these fail?" The tension was palpable, heavy with the weight of their collective skepticism. Jack felt a knot twist in his stomach, the pressure mounting around him like a vice. This was it. This moment would determine not just his credibility, but also the very foundation of his new vision. Swallowing his fear, he stepped forward, meeting Harriet's challenging gaze. "I understand. Change is fraught with risk. But standing stagnant carries its own dangers, the danger of losing what we have. We don't have to abandon our roots, but we can nourish them in new ways. Isn't that worth exploring?" An uncomfortable silence hovered over the group as his words sank in, and he felt the tide begin to shift. Gratitude toward Jack replaced anger as some neighbors began to voice their support. "I have tried some new practices myself," one chime spoke. "Sure, it looks different, but it might be the key to survival in an age of change." As the dialogue evolved, realization dawned: the transformation wasn't just taking place in Jack, it was blossoming in the individuals around him too. They began discussing possible adaptations to their methods, opening their hearts to innovation. Jack stood back, quietly blending into the landscape of collaboration he had envisioned. That day, he had cemented his identity not as an isolated rancher tied to past upon past, but as a leader uniting his community through shared growth. The shy murmurs he had craved earlier now blossomed into animated conversations and resolved discussions on what they could try together. As the workshop concluded, Jack visually absorbed the scene before him. His neighbors were sharing laughter and excitement, envisioning a sustainable path that might nurture their community for generations to come. A profound sense of fulfillment surged within him as he realized he had not just transformed the land, but the hearts and minds of those who relied on it. When he returned to the house, a wave of recognition washed over him. The gnawing doubts that once gripped him had transformed into a solid confidence. Jack stood tall, knowing he had charted a new course, melding the spirit of the past with the promise of the future. In that moment of completion, he understood what it meant to carry forth the legacy of his family, to cultivate hope and resilience in the face of challenges. "You are more than a rancher," a voice echoed in his mind. "You are a pioneer." As he gazed at the horizon, stretching wide and untouched, pride filled his chest. Jack had accomplished what he thought was unattainable: the courage to face his fears, forge ahead into uncharted territory, and inspire connections that would strengthen not just his future, but that of every man and woman who toiled beneath the vast Nebraska sky. You need to subscribe now to witness more incredible transformations like Jack's. This is your moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to feel inspired by stories of courage and growth. Comment your thoughts and theories about Jack's journey below. Be part of our community.